My family didn't accept me. I remember the first time I tried to tell them who I really was, they looked at me like I had betrayed them, like I was a stranger in my own home. The weight of their disappointment felt heavier than any secret I had ever carried. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew each other's business before you even spoke a word. The streets were narrow, lined with houses where families lived under the watchful eyes of neighbors. Every smile and nod felt like a judgment passed. From a young age, I knew I was different, but I didn't know how to say it, not even to myself. I played along with the world's expectations, laughing when I should have cried, nodding when I wanted to shake my head. But inside, the storm was brewing. By the time I turned 15, the pressure became unbearable. I had friends who teased me, teachers who rolled their eyes, and a family who believed they knew exactly what was best for me. I remember standing in front of the mirror one night, hands shaking, heart racing, staring at my reflection as if it could answer all the questions I couldn't. How do I tell them? Will they ever understand? Will they even love me? The mirror offered no answers, only my own reflection staring back, vulnerable, scared, but determined. The day I finally tried to come out, I could feel the tension in the air like electricity before a storm. I remember my mother's eyes, wide and unblinking, as I told her I was gay. The room went silent, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. My father's face was a mask of confusion and anger, and my younger siblings looked at me with questions they didn't know how to ask. That moment shattered the fragile courage I had built over years. I wanted to run away, to disappear, to erase the words I had spoken. But deep down, I knew I couldn't. The weeks that followed were the hardest. My parents stopped talking to me. Dinners became silent battles of willpower. And every phone call from relatives carried a hidden judgment. I cried myself to sleep almost every night, questioning whether I was wrong, whether there was something inherently flawed in me. But in that darkness, I discovered something unexpected, an inner voice that refused to be silenced. A spark of self-respect that whispered, "You are not wrong. You are alive. You are you." School offered no refuge either. I faced bullying, cruel jokes, and whispers behind my back. Friends who I thought were allies distanced themselves. I felt like I was constantly swimming against a current, each stroke exhausting, each breath fleeting. And yet, in the midst of all this pain, I began to notice small victories. A teacher smiled at me in encouragement. A friend offered a word of support. Little by little, these sparks reminded me that the world was bigger than my small town. That life could offer allies even when it seemed I had none. One evening, I found myself wandering the streets alone, under a sky littered with stars, feeling both invisible and infinite. I realized that my story didn't have to end in shame. I could live openly, proudly, even if my family didn't understand me yet. That night, I made a silent promise to myself. I would fight, not just for acceptance, but for a life where I could be free to love, free to exist, free to dream without fear. That was the first time I felt the faint pulse of courage, tiny, fragile, but undeniably real. Even with my silent promise, every day felt like walking through a storm. My parents' cold shoulders became routine. My mother wouldn't look me in the eyes at the dinner table. My father's sighs were heavier than words. It wasn't just disappointment, it was as if I had shattered the foundation of the home. I had always known. Every corner of the house felt smaller, oppressive, a reminder that love at home was conditional. Friends tried to comfort me, but even they didn't fully understand. How could they? I didn't fully understand myself yet. Late at night, when the house was quiet, I'd sit by the window, staring out at the dim streetlights. I imagined faraway cities where people like me were celebrated, not condemned. I read stories of others who had faced rejection and still found joy. And for the first time, a tiny ember of hope flickered. Maybe my life didn't have to be defined by the walls of my childhood home. Maybe I could carve a space in the world that belonged to me. School was another battlefield, Bullying became routine shows in the hallway, whispers behind my back, notes shoved into my locker with words meant to wound. Some days, I considered hiding even more, pretending to be someone I wasn't. But the thought of silencing myself made my chest ache worse than the cruelty of others. I realized that each act of courage, no matter how small, was a step toward freedom. When a classmate mocked me one day, I forced myself to stand tall, to answer calmly. That's who I am. I won't apologize for it. It was terrifying, my voice shaking. But it was the first time I truly felt like I was reclaiming myself. The isolation pushed me to seek communities beyond my town. I found online spaces where LGBT individuals shared their stories, their victories, their heartbreaks. I devoured them like water in a dessert. Each story was a lifeline, a reminder that I wasn't alone. People were out there who understood, who had fought battles similar to mine and survived. Some of them had even turned their pain into activism, creating change for others. That idea captivated me, that my struggles could someday have a purpose beyond my own survival. At home, tension simmered. Arguments erupted over the smallest things, often triggered by my existence. I tried reasoning with my parents, explaining that being true to myself didn't mean rejecting them or their values. Sometimes, my words fell on deaf ears. Other times, they triggered anger. I learned to weather the storm, to stay grounded amidst emotional tsunamis. The pain of rejection was constant, but it became the soil in which my resilience took root. One pivotal evening, my mother, who had been distant for months, finally spoke. Her words were hesitant, unsure. I don't understand you. I don't know if I ever will. It wasn't acceptance, but it was dialogue, and I clung to it like a lifeline. For the first time, I saw that change might be possible, even if it came slowly. I realized that fighting for my own life meant also fighting to educate those around me, to challenge ingrained prejudices with patience, love, and persistence. Outside the home, I began small acts of courage. I joined a local community group that quietly supported LGBT youth. It wasn't easy. People gossiped. Rumors circulated, but being in that space felt like breathing air after being underwater. I met others who had faced the same rejection, the same bullying, the same loneliness. Their stories mirrored mine, but their strength inspired me. Slowly, I started to see a path forward. If I could survive this, maybe I could make the world better for those who came after me. My teenage years became a balancing act between survival and self-expression. I learned to navigate my parents' expectations while secretly nurturing my identity. I kept journals filled with anger, hope, despair, and dreams. I sketched plans for activism, for campaigns, for ways to help others. Writing became my therapy, my strategy, my rebellion. Every word I wrote strengthened my resolve to fight not only for myself, but for every young person in my town who felt trapped in the same invisible cage. By the time I reached adulthood, the fire inside me had grown into a flame I could no longer ignore. I moved to a city where acceptance was more common, where communities thrived openly. The change was overwhelming at first: the freedom to exist without hiding, the ability to speak without fear. But even in this new space, I knew my journey wasn't over. There were families still closed off, schools still hostile, laws still unjust. I realized that my personal liberation needed to extend beyond myself. I wanted to transform the pain I had endured into action, into advocacy, into a movement that could give voice to the voiceless. It wasn't easy. Organizing community events, speaking at schools, writing petitions, all of it required courage I sometimes doubted I had. I faced threats, ridicule, and setbacks. But every time someone told me my work mattered, every time a young person thanked me for giving them hope, I remembered the nights I cried alone in my room, the times I felt invisible and worthless. That memory became fuel. I learned that fighting for rights wasn't just a political act, it was a deeply personal journey, one that intertwined with every tear, every struggle, every small victory I had experienced since that first night I came out. And now, Looking back, I can see the arc of my journey from fear and isolation to courage and advocacy. The journey is ongoing, but the first step, the hardest step, was daring to live authentically in a world that tried to silence me. That step taught me resilience. That step taught me hope. That step taught me that even when your own family doesn't understand, when society judges, when the odds feel insurmountable, your voice matters. Your existence matters. Your fight matters. Asterisk.